Hey everybody, it's Robert coming to you with another adventure into history. I'm out here with Joy today, and we are actually in one of her family cemeteries that we're going to be taking a look at and also doing a little bit of work in today. This is the Milner Crossroads Cemetery, and long before I actually met you, Joy, I came to this cemetery and did a video on it. It was, I think, completely overgrown.
Yes, I saw that video and I was horrified because back in 2000 it had been, or like 2008, 2009, it had been pristine and beautiful. I mean, there was like grass growing. It was gorgeous. Family members who had taken care of it had passed away, and a lot of my generation didn't even know it was here. You know, we never asked the question, and they never offered that it was here. So the first time I saw it was, I think, 2008 or 9. And then after that, it just kind of started growing up.
Right. And so obviously since then, you've had the cemetery cleaned, right?
About 2 years ago, I wanted to clean it up, so I paid to have like a big, sort of just a general, there were trees growing everywhere. You could barely see these graves anymore. They were all grown up and, like giant trees or whatever. And so I had them kind of do a clearing, but it wasn't any kind of like really, manicured situation at all. But Thankfully, there's a church right here, Piney Grove, and they saw that somebody had cleaned this section, and so they kind of continued to have their maintenance people do it. And then I know at least one other family member who's been out here to try to like just do some weed whacking and that kind of thing, just to keep it at bay. Yeah. I mean, it could still use some work, but it looks, if you look at that video, you'll see how crazy it was.
Right. And so there is another cemetery that kind of surrounds this one, but this is the Piney Grove Cemetery. This is an African-American cemetery out here, and it's separate from the Milner Cemetery here, correct?
Well, it is now, but it wasn't always. In fact, so this area was known as the Milner District, and so this part there went in right now is like the white cemetery. It was sort of the original cemetery, but actually back over here, and I don't know if we'll walk around over there at all, but that's probably the older, even enslaved, and then descendants kind of kept getting buried here. So it was the family cemetery, and then it became the Milner Crossroads Cemetery. And from what I can tell, it was actually used for blacks and whites. I mean, I think they had areas, but if you look at death certificates, what started in like 1923 or so, a little bit before, it'll be noted as Milner Crossroads or Crossroads. And then right around 1935, it started to be noted separately as the Milner's Crossroads Cemetery and the Piney Grove. But this church actually is a good bit older. This is probably, I believe, an 1880s church. And then, like I said, this is a family cemetery, so it'll be fun to kind of walk around and look at some of these graves and different monuments and compare the differences.
Tell me who's who in here.
Okay, well, now I hope I don't mess up some of this history. There's, like most families, when you're doing genealogy, if you start looking into your family's history, you'll see names passed down, or we've talked about how, some children didn't make it to adulthood and whatnot, so a niece or a nephew will be named after an aunt or an uncle, and it just starts to get very confusing. So some of the repeating names for the Milner family are Richard and William, and there's quite a few of those two in particular. Oh, and Jesse. Jesse Harrison or Jesse, let's see, I can't remember. There's another version of the H, so it gets confusing. And there's a little town that ended up being built up around the Milner Crossroads when they had a post office, which I want to say is like late 1800s until maybe 1920-ish. So in that time it was called Cleola. And so the founder of that town, they say that the town was named after his girlfriend, and he is buried right here.
Okay.
So this is Jesse Harrison Milner. I don't know if I'm going to get this story completely right, but there's some story about him sort of showing up in the area, and then there was a prisoner, and he was chasing a prisoner. I'll have to go back and look at all that history, but so he was the founder of the town, and he also ended up being the miller So this Milner was a miller, and there's a grist mill. There's only the ruins are left at this point, but it was the Oak Mountain Mills. It was a grist mill. Now it had come into being before he owned it. I think there was one or two families, but ultimately he kind of built it up to be like a pretty big operation, which is interesting. So he named the town Cleola after a girlfriend. That's what it said. And then he was the miller, and he lived in a house that in the Cleola video we'll also look at where my grandmother grew up, actually. But that was known as the miller's house, and it sat right above the mill and the railroad, and it's not far. So now we're standing at the grave of Little Barry Milner, and he this is a really pretty tomb, actually. So Little Barry was the father of Jesse Milner, who we just talked about, who ended up founding the town. They were already here in the area. In fact, Little Barry's father was a man named Hobson Milner, and he was the first one to the first, I think, of three brothers to actually make it to this area of Georgia. And specifically, Hobson made it here to Harris County and this property. And his father was named John Milner. He was a Revolutionary War soldier. And he came from Virginia, and from what I can tell, he never actually lived here, but he was maybe visiting, and he died here. Either that, or where he died in Virginia, Hobson had him move down there. So there's actually another Milner Cemetery that's not far, that's on the home place property. There's for sure John Milner and his wife supposedly are buried there, which makes it questionable as to whether they did live here, but none of the other records that we have suggest they did. So at any rate, the DAR came through at one point and interviewed Little Barry's brother, Richard, who was my second great-grandfather. We'll look at his stone in a minute. But anyway, they ended up placing a headstone in that cemetery, which we might try to find at some later date. That would be kind of fun. But so anyway, Hobson was his father. Little Barry here is Jesse Milner's father, who we just talked about. And then this stone actually talks about Little Barry himself, and then his wife is on the other side. So I don't know if their graves come out like this way or one's on each side. Probably not. They would probably do them like this, right?
Yeah, there's probably
side by side.
Someone's buried here and someone's buried beside them.
And then there's a nice inscription here.
Let's take a look at that. It says, "Our Father of love, thou art gone to thy rest, forever to bask mid the joy of the blessed. His toils are past, his work is done, he fought the fight, the victory won." And then on this side, as we were saying, his wife is
Sarah Jane. She was a Lawson. I don't think it says, yeah, so Sarah J. Milner. And then from here, the way the sun is shining, I can't see what the dates are.
I can see September 22nd, 1826.
Oh, yeah.
To think that's January. It's really hard to see with the sun right
10th.
here. 10th, 1905.
Now, Little Barry had a brother who is my second great-grandfather, and he's over there, so we will head that way as we walk by these. This is the Moons, but Betty was, I think that's Joe Moon over there, I believe. Yeah, Joe Moon, and then his wife she was a Milner. I believe she was, I can't remember if she was Little Barry's daughter or Richard's, but she was a Milner, and that's how they're here.
And we kind of got to watch our stuff in this cemetery too. Joy's on high alert. There is a big rattlesnake, a big timber rattlesnake, actually living in this box tomb over here. So you were told about it.
I was. Actually, I happened to be with a family member yesterday, and we were talking about how difficult it is to keep cemeteries like this clean. And the maintenance gets away from you. And so he saw that I had tried to clean it up, and he came out here and did some work in it. He said it was about a month ago, and he had a video of this rattlesnake, and it went right down in the middle and had a really big rattle. So I told Robert that I thought we might have a guest today. So,
and we did.
Sure enough, we found him.
Yeah,
but he was taking a nap, so he wasn't aggressive or anything.
That's right. That's
and
right.
he continues to sleep, we hope.
Yeah, we saw there's a big old timber rattlesnake.
But we are very
inside of that grave right
cognizant
there.
of his home place.
Yeah, we're not going to go over there. We saw him coiled up, taking a nap right there. Woke him up, and he went inside of the grave to hide.
I'm good with that. He can go on in there and just stay away.
Stay in there.
Yeah. So this is my second great-grandfather, Richard Clark Milner. The Richards get confusing after a while, so I hope I'm not going to repeat any family history that's not quite right, but I think I've got it all worked out. So anyway, he's buried next to, he was married twice, so Lucindy Smith Milner was, I believe, his first wife, possibly his second. And then Roxana, her grave actually is over there with the rattlesnake, so we are not, she's not in the box tomb, but she's like on the other side, you know, facing out where you see that stone. And she's also a Smith, but she's not, I don't think these two Smiths were, like, they're not sisters or anything like that as far as I can tell. But anyway, she got put over there for some reason, so she's taking care of the rattlesnake for us today. So then Richard had a brother named Thomas, and he has a cool marker because he was in the Spanish-American War.
Now this is really cool. This is a shield marker, and it's not one that we see very often here for the Spanish-American War. Usually the military markers we see are more modern, World War I. We typically do not have Union soldiers buried down here, so to see a shield marker like this down here is kind of unusual, kind of interesting. Very cool to see.
John Milner, who I mentioned, was a Revolutionary soldier. There is a photo in one of the history books. So that whole thing, if we ever find it, will be interesting. But that marker was placed by the DAR after the fact, and then it went missing, and then it got found in a ditch, and that it was supposed to get replaced, but because the marker was missing, a logging company theoretically may have actually, you know, rolled over that cemetery, and then that marker never turned back up, so it went missing again. But in the photo, it has a shield, I think, also.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to say that one is a shield marker as well. Now, I've seen modern military markers that mark Revolutionary War soldiers, and they look like the modern markers. So
Oh, really?
I don't know when the shield markers went out of fashion.
I want to say that DAR came through, that lady, I want to say it was like 1912. Does that make sense that it would be?
Yeah.
Or maybe it was 1920. I'm trying to think, when did we look and see when Richard died? He was interviewed, I think he was interviewed and Jesse was interviewed. So if we looked at the dates of their, you know, we would know it was at whatever time, whichever died first, we'd know it was before that. But I want to say it was like 1912-ish. Thomas, his middle name here, the A stands for Arch. And what he went and did is had a son that he named Jesse. Harrison also Milner. So in order to keep from confusing the founder of Cleola and the store owner, there's a Milner store. It's actually, we've gone into it for a video, and it is very cool, very in keeping with the old-fashioned store. So Jesse, that Jesse Harrison Milner owned that store. And so since there were two Jessies, they were both living at the same time. There's actually a letter between the two Jessies, and we'll talk about that in the video too. But because this Jesse who owned the store was the son of Thomas, they called him Arch, or Jesse Arch. And apparently he was kind of rotund, a little jolly little Santa type, and he wore little round glasses, and he was quite the character up at the store. And so there are some folks around that remember him. But that Jesse Arch is the son of this fellow right here, Thomas. And so Thomas, his wife was this Mary Elizabeth Milner, and she was an Oliver. And then her sister is buried here in this plot as well, Lula Oliver Hardy. I assume that either her husband is buried beside her, or he never made it over here if she died first. I'm really not sure what happened. I really don't know where he ended up, but there's space for him here, so who knows. And then if we come over here, Roscoe and Thomas were siblings. So I think that Thomas, his mother was the Roxana Smith that we talked about, is over by taking care of the snake for us. So, and I believe Roscoe, and this is my first great grandfather on this side, William Henry Milner. They're all brothers, but Thomas is their half brother. William Henry Milner, he ended up taking over the mill for our Cleola founder, Jesse, who built the mill up to be a pretty big operation. And then when he died, William Henry took it over. And so he moved into the Miller house. And this is where my grandmother grew up. She had 2 sisters, so they grew up here. This is Sarah Dalton Smith Milner, and that was William Henry's wife.
Sarah
Dalton Smith Milner. So she went by Dalton, so that's
Gotcha.
why they picked that to put under her grave. But so this is my great grandmother. And then this over here is another brother, Chester. It says Chester B, but actually he was, the B is for Barry, but he was Little Barry after the Little Barry that we've already seen. And they called him Uncle Chet or Uncle Check. He had peacocks and he had a lot of money. And my mom specifically just remembers him as kind of a character, and she loved to go see him. I think he was generally well liked and just kind of fun.
So this is the Chet Miller.
This is
Milner.
Chet Milner or Check. I think a lot of them call him Check.
Well, I've heard a lot about
Yes.
Chet Milner recently. Or
Yes.
Check Milner.
Yep. So, and then this is Willie Ruth Brown. I believe she went by Ruth, and she actually she was a niece of Chet and my grandfather or great grandfather, but she also ended up marrying Uncle Check. And my grandfather or great grandfather was not a fan of that, so he went and had them annul it, but just because he didn't think it was proper. But they ended up staying together. He died quite a bit before her, but I believe she's the last burial that happened here in 1990. So that's the last time that anyone in this portion of the cemetery was buried. And then family was keeping it up for another decade, and then it just got away from us and grew up. And here it is today. You can see that a tree fell on it. I think that had happened when you came and videoed already before. That's that. So now we're going to clean some of these graves with the D2 and make them look pretty.
And we're going to start with this grave of Dalton Milner. Now, of course, as you can see on this grave, there's a lot of growth on it. You can kind of see the color that the stone should be up here, and on the rest of it is just this dark growth, and that's what this D2 does, is it removes this stuff. It's a biological cleaner. It doesn't use chemicals, so it's safe for the stone. And the cool thing about the D2 is it will keep working after you've sprayed the stone. It actually works with nature, so every time it rains and something like that, it'll help continue to clean. I don't know if there's any truth to it or not, but it seems like the graves that are hit by the sunlight clean up better with the D2 than graves that are under the trees and the graves.
Well,
that
that'll be
cleaned.
fun transition to see, because she's pretty dirty.
Yeah, so we'll just go ahead and coat this down. I'm just spraying it with the D2 here, and there's lots of different methods that people always suggest to clean stones. There's D2, there's other cleaners too, but D2 is the one that's been tested. It's used by the National Park Service to clean stones. It's the only one that's considered 100% safe for stones. We don't use soap, we don't use household cleaners, definitely never use bleach, because it gets in there, and when it dries, it turns into little crystals that'll that'll get in the pores of the stone and break it. So D2 is the only thing that's considered really safe to clean the stones. Next up, we've got a relatively soft brush here. You never want to use
Professional.
You never want to use a metal brush on these stones, because metal will damage the stone. You can already see, like right here on the stone, there's a little bit of it where it's kind of got a layer that's almost flaking off there, so we want to be careful right there. And depending on the condition of the stone is whether you want to brush it or not. D2 can be used in a no brush method, where we just spray it on like we just did and just let it sit, and it'll work with nature, and every time it rains, it'll help clean it off more and more. It'll get in and eat all of this biological growth. We are going to brush it today. This stone is I don't know what kind of material this is.
I was going to ask, because these can be granite or marble, right? So do we have to worry about which type it is when we use the D2? Probably not, right?
No, the D2 works with all different stones.
Oh, okay.
But the only ones that you really don't want to brush are those old concrete stones that we often find.
Yes. Or like the Eldrin Beal that has plaster work, anything like that, I'm guessing.
Exactly, because the brush will damage those, especially because all of this stuff gets in the pores of the stone. all the biological growth on there gets in the pores of the stone, and when it's in those pores of the stone, it's kind of eating at the stone.
Got it.
And you know, some people say, oh, I like the way it looked with all the patina on it, but patina is harmful to the, you know, stone, and we don't want to preserve these and make sure they're around forever. So we're going to keep it nice and wet with the D2. I always use the wasteful method when cleaning this with the D2, spraying more than we need on there, but the stones that I've cleaned have turned out amazingly
They
nice.
sure have, so I'm really excited to see her looking good. The other nice thing about cleaning them and getting them bright white is that maybe it's just a psychological thing, but it looks like someone cares about the cemetery.
Absolutely.
And you see the cemetery, like if you're logging around there, I don't know, you see it. You see the stones. It stands out a lot more than when they start to get hidden by all the trees and the nature taking its course.
And of course, depending on what kind of stone this is, will determine whether it turns out, you know, bright white or... So we'll move over to William Milner.
Yes, William Henry Milner. And his initials over at the mill, I think that we can find it over there in the foundation stones. He put his initials there, which I always like to go and see that part is still standing and his sort of mill legacy is still there. And I have a few photos of him as well. He died, I believe, he died right before Christmas also.
December 20th, 1945.
Yeah, he had, they say that he had a sore on his, I think he was a tobacco chewer, I believe, and he had a sore on the side of his mouth, and the sore wouldn't go away. It just would not heal. And then finally he ended up at the doctor and it was cancer, and
oh no.
That's how he died.
We'll just let that sit in there too, and we'll move on.
Thomas Arch, the Spanish American.
Absolutely.
Because that kind of stone, what kind of stone is that? A marble or a?
That's a marble stone, I believe. Look at that. You can already see that running off of there.
He's going to be pretty when he's done.
And this stuff will discolor too. The stones will look absolutely awful when you first spray it on. It'll turn this kind of, you can already see it. You can see it changing color right before your eyes there. To kind of that sickly orange, almost reddish color. And the stone, when you first spray it down with D2, it'll often look like worse than it did to start with, you know, sort of thing. But that's where you just have faith and know that it's gonna,
Don't get discouraged.
Yeah, don't get discouraged, because it's gonna clean up. I have cleaned some stones that absolutely just looked awful. In fact, the bird stones that I cleaned a long time ago, they were just absolutely awful. You wouldn't have thought that they would ever look
got
good.
Right real quick.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't tell right now if this stone might not get as much sun as Dalton over there. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, a good experiment. All right, so we'll just let that sit on there. Okay, so we've come over here to Richard Milner, who's got a VA-issued Confederate monument here. That's obviously, you can see again all that growth, all that splotchiness on it. So we're going to give it the old D2 again, just like we did the other ones. You can already see that it's turning that kind of sickly orange. You know, don't freak out about that. That's just the D2 working. Yeah, Joy's going to go ahead and spray the back for us. Over there, while she does that, I'm going to just go ahead and rub this D2 around. Rub it in over here.
Oh, yeah.
And I just wanted to give another little coat here, but you can already see it coming off on this stone. Look at that.
Wow. You're gonna be looking good, Richard, real quick.
So this one's not actually that bad. You can see there's some growth right here. I'm just gonna go ahead and spray this one down. We're not gonna do any scrubbing on it or any brushing, rinsing, none of that. I'm just gonna coat the whole stone in D2 and let nature take its course, let it work with the environment on this stone. And we'll come back and check on this one and see how much it's improved. Like I said, not a whole lot of growth on this stone. You can still see the actual stone there, the actual color and the grains in the stone. Very little growth on it. All right, so I've got this stone coated in the D2. You can kind of already see that color's changing on it in some areas. And that's really where the D2 is working. One day we need to come out here, Joy, and we need to straighten this one up.
Oh, is it?
It's a new foundation.
Oh, it's starting to lean. I guess you're right.
Yep. It does have a list to it. And we've actually done that before. We've taken one apart and straightened it, so that's a project we can handle. Okay, so now we're going to do clean up on the big stone out here. This is a really big stone for Mr. Jesse H. Milner. And Jesse H. here was the founder of Cleola, right, Joy?
Correct.
Founder of Cleola. So we actually went to see his house. We went to see the mill he used to run.
Yep.
All sorts of cool stuff. Now I think this is another one that we should probably, I'll do a scrub on it. And then we should probably just let this one sit, and we should come back for the big reveal in a couple weeks, couple months, however long it takes for this stone to start looking great. Simply because this is a very large stone, and we don't want it to, we don't want to waste all of our D2 on just this stone. Plus it's getting kind of hot out here. We just rub it in, give the D2 a jump start on working here. And never want to use a dry brush. This brush sounds really loud on video, but I always pre-lube it with some water or some D2 before I stick it on the stone. Okay, so this is Jonas, what's that name right there? Rab? R-A-B? Son of Mr. and Mrs. maybe? Is that what it says? I can't see.
It's hard to see.
Let's see if we can't fill it up with some of this D2 here. Can you make that out?
Oh, son of Mr. and Mr. and
Oh, look at it. It's just kind of appearing before us. Grisala?
Priscilla F. Bradshaw, I believe.
Bradshaw, okay. Just kind of pour some of this old D2 on there. Definitely using it the less precise way at the moment.
Some of the
My
names
sprayer
are so
stopped
great.
working. Look at that color change on this. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Just brush that in. This has
Very satisfying.
It is. This has a lot of growth on it. It's interesting the way that some of these stones clean up so easily, and some of them are a little bit more stubborn. The other Robert and I did a couple in Marion County that we brought back to looking just as good as new the same day.
Yeah.
Jones Rab, son of James M. and Grisala F. Bradshaw.
Now, I think I may have already said this, that this started, as far as I understand, as a family cemetery, but then it grew to be kind of a community cemetery.
Now this is interesting over here. I've seen a couple of these recently where we look at a grave and it does not have the engraving for one of the partners. And so the question you always have there is John actually buried here? Because this stone was purchased when Sarah died. Sarah E. Reynolds, she died December 23rd. She was born rather December 23rd, 1868. And she died the day after her birthday, December 24th, also Christmas Eve, 1902. John obviously didn't die at that time, but they purchased this stone. He was born in 1862, and his death date is left blank. So it'd be a cool thing to find out whether he's actually here or not.
You're right. I always assumed he was. I never really noticed that, but there's no.
Yeah, either someone did not come back and put his death date here, or he's buried somewhere else. There is only a footstone for S.E.R. That's obviously Sarah Reynolds. So he doesn't have a clue
that he's not here.
Yeah, that's another clue that he's not here, unless they, of course, if they didn't come back and put a date on a stone, they may not have bought him a footstone either. But this one's got a lot of growth on it too. We'll just go ahead and give it a little spray down here on the face of it. And let the old D2 work its magic. It'd be really cool to come out here in the future. I can't wait. It'll be people watching this video, they'll get to see the change in just a few minutes. Us, we're gonna have to wait. Kind of like time travel.
Kind of. Or like in the olden days when you watched a show on Tuesday and you had to wait till next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Nowadays you just stream it. Netflix asks if you're still watching.
Look at the color that this has changed.
Oh yeah.
That pink on
that
there.
very pink color.
Yeah. Well, let's go over here and look at Lula's grave. Lula Hardy.
Yeah, she was an Oliver. I don't know right offhand what the M stands for. Look how deeply that's carved. But this is just really beautifully carved, actually, and this detail is really pretty.
Okay, it's been some months since we were here in the Milner Cemetery, and I wanted to give an update on all of the graves that we sprayed the D2 on out here. Some of these graves are actually going to need another treatment, like the big granite Milner stone right here. We can still see that there's some of that discoloration and staining on there. So I'm going to treat this with some more D2, but some of these graves cleaned up really, really nice, and I'll be interested myself to see the before and after in the videos. I believe that I sprayed this grave off with D2. It certainly looks like it. And then a little Barry Milner right here. I believe we cleaned this one, and it looks really good. And kind of compare it to those back there that I don't believe we used the D2 on. And I don't entirely remember which ones we used the D2 on out here, or how they looked before. So I'll be surprised myself when I get to go back and edit this video together. That one is obviously not cleaned, but probably need to come back out here and put some D2 on it as well. I don't believe we D2'd this one. I could be mistaken. But there's still a bunch of growth on that if we did. It just looks mighty clean. We're gonna get over here to some more that we definitely cleaned. Now this one has retained a bunch of that staining on this stone. And for some reason the D2 just didn't seem to clean some of these as much as it has in the past. But then there's examples of others, like this one. Thomas A. Milner, who was in the Spanish-American War, which is not a tombstone that we see very often, I'd say. And that one cleaned up beautifully. Still a little bit of dirt on there, but again, another treatment should make it nice again. And coming over here, Lula Hardy's grave stone looks very nice. Then I thought these did well. Still, again, we've got a little bit of that staining left on it. I just need to come back out here and do another application, and these will continue to clean. Something that I've noticed with the D2 is it seems that the more sunlight a grave gets, the better it cleans up. But I wanted to give you an update on the D2 process. I cleaned the old cemetery sign at the Waverly Hall Cemetery. It had a bunch of, it's granite, for reference sake, and it had a bunch of just nasty growth on it. Looked like a spooky old haunted cemetery sign. And I wound up cleaning both sides of it off, and the side that gets the most sun is almost perfectly clean now, whereas the back side has not cleaned up as well. So I think that when the graves aren't exposed to sun as much, the D2 just simply takes a little bit longer to work. Maybe needs more applications or some more scrubbing. So that's just something to note as we continue this preservation process of cleaning these old graves. So this one is certainly looking good right here, especially from this angle. But so we showed you cleaning these graves off, and I've brought you back to show you the after for, I think I covered every grave that we cleaned off out here, but there's some more graves out here that I think deserve taking a look at. Like this one right here. This one has the rattlesnake that's living in the rock box tomb right there. But there's a lot of tree growth out here. So what we're going to do next is we're going to come out here and actually try to clean the cemetery up and remove some of these small growth trees that are crowding this place out. So stay tuned for that. That'll be another video. I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time on another adventure into history.